And we are live.
Welcome, 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 Black men, young Black men vote. My name is Christopher Lucci. I am a local sports agent in Atlanta, Georgia, in Gwinnett County. I am excited about this conversation with these prestigious, unique men about power. This conversation is about power. And what is power, right? I mean, for me, anything that Black men unite in equals power. I mean, I believe that as Black men, we have a responsibility, to activate that power. There's many ways we can activate it. We can activate it in the school system, in our community, in the streets, in our home, in business. And also one important area, we can activate it at the polls. And so I'm very proud in the fact that Black men did get out and vote this year in November. We did an excellent job of representing at the polls in November. And at this time, we have a unique opportunity. We have a unique opportunity to improve and repeat that here in Georgia with our Georgia runoff January 5th. For me, I grew up in Detroit, and I recently, have had small children. I have a 1-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son to go along with my 16-year-old. So kind of like starting over. And I wanted to, I hadn't done anything politically, or I hadn't made any incredible stance, from a political side or from a voting side. I've done things in the community. I've had a basketball foundation, which is where my sports agent came out of. But I wanted to, make a difference. I wanted to give my kids something to reminisce about as I, look back currently now with, the old photo albums and looking back at my father and some of the events that I shared with my dad and my mom growing up. I wanted to give my children, my young children especially, I wanted to give them a visual. So at that point, it was an opportunity for me to, to do something different. And so I thought it would be great with creating this panel and having a conversation and letting people hear voices, let them hear our voices, men, Black men of power, and where we stand and why it's so important. So that being said, I would love to bring Brother Etienne in, who will moderate the conversation and introduce the panel participants.
Forgot about the mute. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Etienne Maurice. I'm the founder of Walk It LA, and we are a family that brings people together from all walks of life to fight for racial equity and heal in solidarity through the arts, health, and wellness. I started, gathering and organizing in my community here in Los Angeles around the time of Ahmaud Arbery when he was killed. And that is what really lit the fire under my behind to really organize in my community and get people to get active. And we started protesting in the city, in the middle of Los Angeles. But then we offered, a space of healing through the practice of yoga. And so we'd offer, yoga classes, free yoga classes for Black and Brown community members to really partake in the healing process. Because just as important as it is for us to fight together, we must all learn to heal together as well. And I think this is going to be a great space of healing as well, just by having this dialogue with these wonderful Black gentlemen that we have here in this Zoom. First, we got my man, DJ Greg Street, world renowned DJ, V103. What's going on, brother man? We got Bishop Matthew Brown from Greater Community Kojic and Get Souls to the Polls. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got my man, Antonio Brown, Atlanta City Councilman in District 3, notable citizen of Georgia, of the GA Proclamation. And then we have Daniel Blackman, Public Service Commissioner and candidate. And we got McCall Driver, Prodigious Academy founder. What's going on, gentlemen? How we feeling?
Feel good.
Great to be with you.
Good. Glad to be here.
Real good.
Good. Now, first up, I'm coming from the outside looking in. I'm in Los Angeles, but I feel like I still have to lend my voice to the fight, to this election that's going on. We all know Biden won this election, but we still have so much more to go. So, and don't let me forget, I forgot Mondale Robinson, the reason why we're here, founder of the Black Men Voter Project. See, you wasn't on the flyer, so
listen, fam,
I almost forgot about you.
it's all good. We got a lot to talk about, and nobody ain't worried about no accolades like that. Let's keep it moving. I'm with you. I know you ain't mean nothing by it.
Thank you, man. Well, I mean, I'll start this off. You can respond to this first. What is at stake with this election right now as we try and take over the Senate in Georgia?
So, I think to only consider what's going on in Georgia right now about the Senate may be a huge mistake that national politics like to do a lot. I think it's better if we center it in instead of who, meaning the parties that will be in control, think about what's at stake, what issues are on the ballot. Right now, we know with the current administration that is coming in, that they have made some promises to our community that we can't let go idle, and the necessary a necessary part of that is them having a government, a legislative branch that is not divided, so as to ensure that they hold true to the idea that they're gonna end or decriminalize marijuana, expunge records associated with that with marijuana. They're gonna also cancel some of this college debt that people are suffering from. We're gonna also address this ill way that we police Black men and Black people in general in this country. So all of this is at stake for Black men in this country. Talking about candidates or parties is not a motivating factor to move us to the polls. So it's our job to focus on what issues are at stake. And I'm telling brothers all the time that qualified immunity, and while we don't use that language enough, or those two words, we definitely talk about what's at stake with qualified immunity, meaning police officers will be held accountable if they do things that are harmful or illegal, like killing Black bodies. We also know that another thing that's on the ballot, not just with this election, but in general, is the fact that we need to address how we educate Black men and prepare them for the workforce. We need trades back in school, trades including coding and also nursing careers, so as that folk cannot be subjected to the racist practices that are associated with trying to get a job in this country. And then we also need to address the criminal justice system in a real way, i.e. ending cash bail in this state. And that all of that is on the ballot.
Amazing. Gentlemen, let's talk about the importance of voting, right? Prior to this election, there was a real push to get Black men to vote, given that this is the title, Young Black Men Voting. Why was it important for you to participate in this election, this past election, and why is it even more important for young Black men and Black people in general, period, to participate in this upcoming election, in this runoff right now here in Georgia? Just anybody.
I'll start because we're having the least amount of experience. I want to let the heavy hitters go. So I think the biggest thing, I've been in education for 7 years. And I think what happens, or what I've seen, is the fact that civic engagement is looked at as something that we don't have. And it's not, and it's looked at as something that we can't control. And I watched brother like Antonio Brown, and I've like seen, and I looked up the campaign for Daniel Blackman, and I just think about the work of like those two brothers alone. And you think about the fact that we have people that literally don't believe that their vote counts. And I think one of the biggest things as an educator that I've tried to fight and try to help people understand is, it's just like the Student Government Association when you're in high school. The biggest thing that you learn about Student Government Association is they say everybody, including all students, are members of the Student Government Association. So if we are reinstilling in Black male voters and reinstilling in our communities that the government systems that take place don't take place without you. They wouldn't try to suppress your vote if it didn't count. So I really think like one of the biggest things that we have to focus on is that civic engagement, one, needs to be reinstalled into schools as like, I don't know if it needs to be a course or it needs to be an elective, but it needs to be broken down and restructured when you understand that your civic engagement is important, because you wouldn't see all the work to stop you from having a voice if your voice didn't count. But it's the fact that we've been already classically conditioned to believe as a people, especially Black males, that our voices don't count. It's easier to fall susceptible to the fact of not doing the work. So civic engagement needs to be an applicable skill set that's reinstalled in our people. And I'll start there.
I'll add too. I think one thing we have to be cognizant of is that we have to his point, civic engagement is so critical. You know, I had this conversation. We did a panel with Bakari Sellers, T.I., and Offset prior to the general election, and Tip brought up a good point. He said, you know, when you go look at an old picture from when you were in grade school, he said the first thing you do is you look for yourself in that picture. And I think politics has not given Black men a reflection that we can go and look at and reference. Yes, Barack Obama did a tremendous amount for Black males and the image of Black men around the world. But to the average brother that's out, that's out there, whether he's a husband, a father, an entrepreneur, whatever status you are, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we can show Black men where they are in the political process, and also to make sure that they know we're not just on the ballot when it comes to criminal justice reform. We're entrepreneurs, we're DJs, we're doctors, lawyers, we're businessmen. So we have to show the reflection of every aspect of life. And there's a quote from Frederick Douglass to your question about why I got involved. And Frederick said, man, it's better to build strong boys than to repair broken men. And so for me, this space is so sacred because I understand that if we don't invest now, we're gonna have to repair later.
I also think that, first of all, I agree with both of you, but I also think that from another perspective, it is a matter of reclaiming the dignity space of the Black male in America. It is moving from struggle and hustle to and survival, from survival, struggle, and hustle into success. It is the new paradigm of extending protests into shaping policy. And until we can have those conversations where we empower, we have more young Black men that are educated, that are entrepreneurial, that are moving from the hustle to really creating and returning really to a sense of dignity in the community, to having stature in place. And so these things are critically important. The vote is just a tool that says more about our cultural shift than it does necessarily about the candidates. And I like what Mondale said, that we keep talking about candidates and personalities when we really need to have a very strong conversation in our community about policies.
Definitely.
I think also for Black men in our communities, we talk about hustle and struggle all the time, but I think we really have to we have to kind of reinvent ourselves to where we kind of push the whole glorifying the negativity. Like if you pay attention, like people like Antonio and Daniel used to be our superheroes. But the guys who own the corner stores, the guy who owned the gas stations and the beauty shops and the barber shops. But if you pay attention to how our community transitioned into making the drug dealers and the hustlers more of the quote unquote superheroes, and they kind of pushed our political heroes and our business owners to the side because everybody glorifies what they can see with their own eyes and not understand the whole system and what's going on. But I really think like the brothers like Antonio and Daniel, the guys that are really deep into politics, that are running for offices, that are holding offices, we have to start back putting those guys up on a pedestal, because that's what they do in their community. When you look at TV now, they've turned the whole campaign is nothing but a whole slur campaign against the opponents. Like, it's really crazy, and they've gone that far because really that's what we did. We did it to our own self, and now they're doing it to us on the political side, because in the community, the average young Black man don't even know who Antonio Brown is. They don't know what office. A young Black man living in his district don't even know who he is. So we got to make these guys, we got to bring them back to that superstar, to that superhero status that they deserve to have from being educated about politics and learning politics and just being involved. Like, I could tell you guys a story. When I was growing up as a kid in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, some of my classmates, when we were like in middle school, there's a rich guy named Bobby Chain. His daughter and sons went to school with me. And Bobby Chain owned a company called Chain Electric. And this is what really hit the switch with me when it came to politics. He ran for mayor, and his whole campaign was, I'm going to run for mayor of my city, and I'm going to do it for free. I'm not going to take a salary. But I'm like, okay, you own a company, you have a construction company, and you have a lighting company in the city. So when he ran for office, every new building that was constructed by the city, every new building that was constructed on the campus of University of Southern Mississippi, his company built all the buildings. So at an early age, the trigger went off that politics is really nothing but planning and development, because Kelly Loeffler is running for office that pay $175,000 a year, and she got millions and millions and millions of dollars. So it's like, we have to make sure we educate our young men to understand the importance of these offices and these positions on a local level, not just the president, so they can understand how government actually works and how much influence their vote actually has in making a decision on who controls what's going on in and around what we have going on.
Antonio, I see you smiling over there as he was talking about that. What's your sentiment? Do you agree with him?
Well, shout out to Greg Streets. I mean, he's an amazing man, and he's known me before I even became a city councilman and the work that I was doing in the community. And you're right, they don't know me, but they know the football player, Antonio Brown. So that speaks volume about where our people are. I wanted to touch on a few things because I think a lot was just discussed right now. I think there was a lot packed into this one question, and I just kind of want to break some of it down. Mr. Robinson said he spoke about the Black vote, and I'm someone who grew up Jehovah's Witness. Most of my life, I never partook in the political process. My first time voting ever was this election for the president of the United States. I didn't even vote for Obama. And as an individual that's been on the outside looking in, the Black vote has been enslaved, abused, and forgotten for decades in this country. And the perpetrators are the ones that have painted this facade as though they are here to save us. And as I've said on social media and on countless occasions, ain't nobody coming to save us. We have to save us. And in order to save us, we must educate ourselves. We must become informed of what's happening, not just at the presidency level or the Congress level or the Senate level, but at the county commissioner level, the city council level, the school board level, because all of these points of resources are the same resources that have been limited in our communities for decades. I represent communities that have been poor in the city of Atlanta for over 40 years. And this is under Democratic leadership. This is under leadership that has perpetuated all of these ideals about what they're gonna do and how they're gonna do it, but for some strange reason, it never gets done. So for someone that has now entered in what I call the belly of the beast, and I am fighting on behalf of the people, you begin to see and understand the inner workings of what is transpiring. And it's so funny, because many of you have said this, on this Zoom, but it's true. People utilize their position of power to wield it for their own benefit and gain. And they forget about the least of these, and no one holds them accountable. And the Black vote that puts them in office, that gives them the edge within our democracy, is forgotten about. So someone else was speaking about, they've made all these plans. What is the Black agenda? Well, what is the Black agenda? And when are we going to have conversations about reparations? When are we going to talk about making the Black community whole again in this country? Because we continue to treat the conditions instead of curing the problems. Because it's easier to treat them and dangle carrots in the faces of Black people to make them believe that they have earned something, when in reality, they're not even getting a piece of the pie. So it's interesting because as an individual that has just started voting, for me, you know, I realize how important it is to vote, but I have done the work to educate and inform myself. You know, I barely graduated high school. So to be writing legislation for the city of Atlanta, to be fighting and advocating for our Black and brown communities, you know, it's a powerful token of the possibilities that exist within all of us. And I think if we start projecting those possibilities on our young people and we start inspiring them through our action, like many of us are doing on the Zoom, I think people are going to get more involved. I mean, I started a campaign on social media where I started to break down legislation and break down policy on a granular level so that our people and the community at large could digest this information and understand and learn what is happening that is impacting them every day. And we got so much great feedback. And now we're launching a national campaign to do this same work. So I think these are the things that it's going to take for us to truly rally the Black vote and inspire our young people to get more engaged in the civic engagement process.
Well, you bring up a great point, Antonio. And when
if you don't mind, I just want to say something because there's a continued strand through the answers that we should address, because it is easy to become misunderstood to those who are not well versed in what makes a super voter. A super voter is a person who votes every election. People who vote every election, they don't do it because they are more educated or better willed than folk who don't vote. What we are forgetting that is that every election cycle, we find out at the end of that election cycle what makes voters turn out. And that's resources spent on them. That means the amount of money people spend to turn out voters. They target the same voters over and over again, which means those voters are more likely to go to the polls. So I think what we're talking about may be skipping 2 or 3 levels. Those 2 or 3 levels is the fact that we're not addressing the fact that Black men represents a population that lives with their backs against the wall, meaning their basic needs aren't met. Majority of Black men in this country are not in a position where they have secure housing, they have a well enough economy or economic position where they can think about things that are seen as self-actualization, meaning they don't have time to think about buying art, saving money, or even voting, because voting, the way it's presented to Black men, the electoral process, the way it's presented to Black men, does not address the real issues that we suffer from. So when we're criticizing Black men, let's make sure that we start with the system. And I think those 2 steps often get confused, and people are always, praising those folk who go out and vote and forget that those folk are always targeted. The same people are targeted by both parties always to turn out and vote. That means those people are more likely to go vote because you're spending more resources on them. We found out that when you target Black men, just like you do any other demographic, Black men are more likely to vote as well. So it's not just that Black men don't go vote. It's more about how we're spending resources and what those resources look like. Usually when people are targeting Black men, it's a piece of mail in the mailbox or an ad. Neither of those are effective ways of reaching voters, especially a voter, a demographic Black men who were the second people in this country supposedly to earn the right to vote with the passing of the 15th Amendment. But we know 150 years ago, Black men were not able to vote. What we were the first guinea pigs for voter suppression, and it never stopped. So when people call us apolitical or they say Black men are apathetic, they've already failed Black men. And what's really ailing us, what's really ailing Black men is not an apolitical stance. I don't know an apolitical Black man. Standing up straight as a Black man in this country is a political statement. What we are are pissed off at this system. There's a level of antipathy that exists. But if you're addressing hate, antipathy is hate. If you're addressing hate like it's nonchalant, which is apathy, then you've already failed at your mission of switching these people from their current position to a position that's different, which is a every election voter. And that's the business of Black Male Voter Project and what we do. So we don't start our conversations telling Black men how important elections are, because that's a failed tactic. Because Black men usually, when you say that to them, those who are not those who are not involved in politics usually will say, my life doesn't change regardless who's in office. And there's some truth to that, because if you look at who we are, we make up the lowest rung of all social markers in this country, be it the shortest life, more likely to be killed by cops, horrible health outcome, income ratio, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We are at the bottom of those rungs. So we need to make sure that we're addressing those issues before we can even talk to Black men about voting.
Well, Mondale, I agree with everything that you're saying, but I do want to ask, like, what do we tell those young Black men who feel as if though their vote doesn't matter? Because time and time again, even in this past election, I've had those conversations. And it's like, it got to the point where I was like running out of answers, because it's almost like they don't believe in their power to vote. And they don't believe that, like you said, their life will change if they do vote. So what do we say to them?
So I mean, what I was talking about, brother, that's a great question. And the problem though is we don't need to make people believe that their vote count. We need to show them how elections, the repercussions of elections, right? And what happens at elections. The problem with that though is this country likes to make the presidential election, the federal election sexy, and forget about local elections, which are issues that are really plaguing Black men, the lived experience. And we keep saying young men, and that's cool, but that's the national narrative. If you look at Black men across demographics, Black men just sit out elections in general. If you look across this country, nearly half of the Black men that are registered to vote, nearly half of the Black men that are registered to vote have not voted in 5 consecutive federal elections. That means a couple things. One, these are not children, right? If in order to be registered to vote for 5 federal elections, that's more than 12 years ago. So that means that 12 plus 18 mean they're at least 30 years old. And they've not voted in 5 consecutive elections. That means they didn't vote for Barack Obama in 2008, 12, or they didn't vote in any midterm elections in between there and 2020. So we have a real problem, and it's the way we present politics. So starting with why an election is important is not going to move this demographic, because they're going to say from 2008 to now, my lived experience is the same. We need to start talking about the effects of elections rather than the election and the candidates themselves. The way we do it is we don't talk to brothers first, we listen to brothers. We spent the whole 2019 up until we began to engage brothers this year, listening to find out what issues was most important. People have been talked at their entire life about what's important to them. Most of it is based on polls from a small swath of population, and that population don't even represent the folk that we need to turn out to expand the electorate. Those people are usually people who are already voting. That's who pollsters call likely voters. They don't call unlikely voters. They don't call brothers who are gang members. They don't call drug dealers who don't have any time to participate in politics. So, but we do at Black Male Voters Project. We specialize in talking to brothers in the club, on the corner, and who are part of street tribes. And what we found out was the messaging is completely different than what the national polls are telling us or what anybody's telling us. And it's an effective way to engage them anyway, because you're listening to these people centering their issues versus centering their party and party loyalty. And that builds something that is not transactional. The transactional nature that exists in traditional campaigns is the hugest hurdle for increasing Black men's participation in election, not Black men themselves or some kind of negative pathology that exists in us.
Hey,
Well, one thing that I would add is, no, go ahead, Antonio. No.
No. I was just going to say that, as an individual who's never voted, this presidential election is the first time that I've actually voted. And coming from, I grew up in poverty majority of my life. So the hood I grew up in, none of them ever voted. And none of them were ever educated or informed of what it is to vote. And, as an individual that ran as a city council person that never voted before, and as an individual that was speaking to the issues that young Black brothers relate to, like what it's like to grow up poor, what it's like to struggle with housing, what it's like to have the resources to go to school or get a good job, then you're able to inspire these young people to see outside of their conditions and environment and take interest in something they would normally not take interest in. And, you know, I got on this app called Bigo, and I got on here on the day of the election, and I started to do what they call like live chats, where people from all over just come on from different places and you talk to them. And as soon as they came on, my first question to them was, but did you vote? And immediately 90% of them said, no, I'm not voting. My vote doesn't count. Now, these are young people. It was really a mixed range of people, but mostly young Black men and women that I spoke to at this time. And when I began to tell them my story, that I was actually an Atlanta City councilman, they couldn't believe it. And I told them that not only am I an Atlanta City councilman, but I made it into the runoff by only 3 votes. 3 votes allowed me to enter into a runoff that would shape the future of some of the poorest communities in all of Atlanta. 3 votes. And when I told them that, they could not believe it. They were like, huh? So what do you do? What does a council person do? And they became so inquisitive and curious about how someone that looked like them, that talked like them, that connected with them could do this, could accomplish this. And that told me like, wow, like it's not that these folks are just, they don't care. I think that politics have never been cool before. I mean, Obama kind of made politics cool again, but then, you know, they became uncool again and people stopped believing. And I think what they see in Mr. Blackman and myself as, an individual that is running for office or is an elected official, I think they see themselves in us, and it inspires them to connect with the political process differently. It causes them to be inquisitive. It sparks their curiosity to see what else, who else can I do it to? And I think that's what's important. And that is what's missing. And even as a city councilman, that is, as I'm going around and speaking to people, they've lost hope, not because they don't want to do something. They've lost hope because they don't know. They don't understand. They don't relate. And that's because we've operated from a status quo leadership in this country for decades. And we've forgotten about the least of these. And those least of these, now we're asking to rise up above your environments and conditions and now believe in us and vote for us, even though we haven't done shit for you in this country, but imprison you, but traffic drugs and weapons in your communities to destroy you. And then we criminalize you because we criminalize poverty in this country. But now we're asking you to vote and believe in us. No, that's bullshit. And that's we need to have.
And I wanted to say this. I didn't mean to cut you off, Antonio. But I really think you brought up a good point, because we got to tell our own narrative. Like what's happening in this country, especially with Black men, is our narrative keeps getting hijacked. Everyone is telling our story. Everyone is coming to us. One thing that I've done differently, because it bothered me as the father of 3 Black boys, every time somebody approached me, not knowing my background, not knowing my professional career, and I don't say this arrogantly, I've done well, and when people, I take it as an insult when you think the first thing you should come to me about is criminal justice. Like, we're more than just one specific narrative. So I think a couple of things have to change. Number one, what I learned this year more than any other year for a long time is when you look at Ahmaud Arbery, when you look at Breonna Taylor, Daniel Cameron was a Black man, a DA, right? I mean, an attorney general. in a state, right? We don't do a good enough job, to Mondale's point, with breaking down what these elections actually mean. We gotta get out of this, space where we celebritize. I know it's not a word, but we create these larger than life figures out of these individuals, because when you create the space where they have to look at them, there are a lot of brothers that couldn't identify with Obama. There are a lot of brothers that didn't come from his background. There are a lot of sisters out here that might not identify with Stacey Abrams, and that's nothing against any of them. It's just that when we create these spaces in politics where we're trying to get them to identify with an individual, and when I say hijack the narrative, that's when you get people that think, oh, I'm gonna get a celebrity or a rapper or an actor, and we're gonna tell them to vote, and they're gonna come vote. And that's, you don't speak at us, you listen. And Mondale couldn't have said it better. I have a quote in my office that says, it's an African proverb that says, listen to understand and not to respond. Right? Because we consistently have gone into these spaces where we're talking down to people and talking at people, and they're saying the whole time, look, brother, like, I need a job. Like, I'm in the climate space, I'm in the environmental justice world. And when I see people that come talking about polar ice caps melting in Antarctica, I'm telling them, you go to the hood, you go to our community, you go to any neighborhood where there are Black and brown people, and you speak past our issue, but you want us to jump onto your situation. The numbers don't add up like that. And I think all of us are making a case that we have already been given a perception of how we are and who we are. So instead of mocking and ridiculing and talking down to so many Black men about why isn't the participation there, let's get to the root of the problem and get them to identify, how to see themselves in the process. And I'll close with this. One thing that I've begun to do, obviously I'm a political candidate, but I want to do something called build the bench. I want to get brothers that are involved in politics, not because it's the thing to do, but like when you look at Ahmaud Arbery, we need to connect the dots to show that marching and that protesting made sense, because now we've elected a new DA, because we showed those individuals that the root of your problem isn't just what happened to Ahmaud, it's the laws in place that allows that to persist. So we need to make sure that we're recruiting brothers, not just to run for office like Antonio, not just to be, to be community leaders. This brother that was in Ferguson, real quick, he ran for office after what he saw in Ferguson, and he had a bad background, came from a bad community. And I don't mean to even say bad, because I don't want to feed into the narrative, but this brother came from an underserved community and ended up being a city councilman, right? But the pressure of him getting to that point, there wasn't an infrastructure around him to keep him at that point. So then he finally just said, I don't want to run for office again, because he wasn't prepared mentally, physically, or spiritually to take on the capacity of being out front. And we got to do a better job as Black men of cultivating each other, of being our brother's keeper. One of the best things I saw growing up was the Million Man March, because that was the first time I saw Black men make a pledge with each other and say, hey, we're going to be accountable for our houses, for our children, for our communities, for our schools, for our businesses. And we've gotten so far away from that narrative because of my beginning point. We've allowed everybody but Black men to tell our story. And we have to get back in front. We got to work with the Greg Streets of the world, work with the Mondales, work with the Mr. Drivers of the world. We got to come together and create the agenda that we're willing to get behind. But if we keep letting people tell us what the narrative is, nobody's going to jump out in front of a crowd that doesn't identify with the message you're trying to get us to say. So if we're not identifying with the message that means something to us, that drives us, whether it's jobs or it's opportunities or it's just dignity, whatever it is, we got to come together before there's a Black agenda, and we just got to speak to what's here and what's here. Because if we're not speaking to what's really keeping Black men in the condition they're in from a mental health and a physical and spiritual standpoint, we're going to continuously point fingers rather than be a part of the solution.
If I could jump in, first of all, I enjoyed all the dialogue, but I think it gets back to something that I would alluded to in a very short space. And that is that there's a need for a cultural shift. Part of what we've done in the Church of God in Christ is that we actually did a Souls to the Polls campaign for the national elections, and that's in every state. And that is about literally coming up with a systematic way to engage, first of all, to educate and engage. We keep talking about engagement, but education, and Mondale broke that down in Antonio and Mr. Blackman. We have to educate. And then here's the other issue. Having my story is I'm from Buffalo, New York. So I served as the deputy mayor in the city of Buffalo, not only just as a commissioner of general services, director of intergovernmental relations, we vice president of economic and community development, where we actually took the home ownership zone and the enterprise communities. We created we created wealth in the poorest part of our neighborhoods. We built grocery stores, both on the west side, which was predominantly Hispanic, and the east side, which was predominantly Black. We have to we have to also think systemically. We're trying to engage people into a process that they have no clue of. And I agree with you that some of them don't vote. 1 in 5 elections, national elections, they'll vote in. We have to mitigate this whole inherent skepticism that people are dealing with because they don't trust it. Instead of us trying to convince them, we have to educate them on the process, but then internally, we have to build a system that will keep us moving forward. I know what Mr. Blackman talked about in terms of that whole celebrity piece, and I agree with him, but think about the issue here. Think about the fact that the plight of the average Black man and the Black man in America has been one where they literally scurry to places where they can feel important. I talk about this as a preacher, that it kills me. A whole lot of people have never been called to ministry, but it's just another way to kind of game a system or to feel validated in their own stuff. So you take it where you get it. Politics is the same. And as a result, what happened? Because we have not thought systematically, we have not developed a systematic culture, we don't have that process, we find ourselves warring in the community again for the limelight. So I agree with all of what you're saying. But I think getting back to this whole issue here in Georgia for this runoff, it's going to take all of us. I'm so glad we're not all the same. I'm glad that we are diverse. I'm glad that we have different, there are policies that you may agree with and I may not agree with. But I definitely agree with this, that if this election and the election of Mr. Biden represents that we bought a car, then I'm here to say that the senatorial runoffs is the fact that we need to get the keys. We got a car with no keys. And if we don't begin to educate people in this process about the role of the Senate, the role of the Attorney General, the role of the DA, the role of the sheriff. We were involved in the Cobb Ministerial Alliance here because I'm in Marietta, Georgia. So we've not only done church stuff, we've done civic and sacred. We've done community. We're bridging gaps to have conversations about how we change how people live. And I think the engagement process, and I love what Mondale talked about because it's in the club, it's in the street. It is not necessarily the super voter who has the money spent on them, but it is our responsibility in the church, in the street, in the council chamber, in the DA's office, wherever we have influence, it's our job to educate and then engage. Let them feel what they feel and honor that. We're not better than anybody. We just simply have to tell them they got to come along to make it better. And the stuff that Mr. Brown was talking about, I clearly get it because we had to go through it in Buffalo. So I understand that from Democratic leadership, Republican leadership, it's the system that has failed. But here's our problem. Black folk are trying to fix a system that was never built for them. So we're on the outside from Jump Street. So all of the conversation about fix the system, change the system was not built for us. So now what we have to do is go back to our communities and educate them on systematic thinking, systematic collaboration, so that we can actually penetrate the system, grab either a board seat, grab a council seat like you have, Mr. Brown, and build now systematic coalitions to keep you there so that you can bring about transformation. Sorry, guys.
No. Go ahead.
That's absolutely fine.
Bishop, so I apologize for cursing. I forgot you were on here and
And that's what I'm talking about. Don't worry about it. Listen,
Okay.
I'm listen. I'm like Jesus. I hang out with everybody. I got that. Okay. So whether it's cursing on Zoom, cursing in the community room, I don't know what they do. We cool. We're talking about this election, and I'm so glad. I appreciate the respect though. But the point that I'm making is I'm talking to brothers who's cursing all the time, and they'd be like, "I'm sorry, Rev. But I need to hear their heart." And we need to develop that relationship so that I can say, I get this. Now what you gonna do? Because the other issue is there has to be a level of accountability. And I'm not critiquing black men. I'm not saying, we're not here to put down black men, but I'm saying there's a level of accountability that when I talked about the vote brings up about claiming dignity space. That's the thing about Mr. Brown, about Mondale, and all of you, Chris, because all of a sudden we got to say something to our children. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add, like, it's so interesting that you brought up, like, we're trying to fight to fix a system that never was built for us. And I think one of the most interesting things is I was watching the film The Expendables yesterday, Expendables 2. And it was the scene where they were dealing with the fail-safe, that the code keeps changing every time you try to mess with it. And I feel like that's the thing we're dealing with this system. It's like the codes are changing every time you try to, like, deal with it. So they see a Daniel Blackman, they hear about an Antonio Brown, they know the work of Chris Lucci, they know about a Mondale Robinson, they know about an Etienne, they know about you. Like, we're not gonna act like this system is not aware. The system is very aware of who is in power and who are making power plays. And I think that's something that we have to strategically think about, is that this system is moving so much and it's strategically changing. So that's where I'm gonna bring in my perspective from the classroom. Unfortunately, because poverty is a pandemic and we're not looking at poverty as a pandemic, we have young men 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, who are affected by the same struggles and stresses that their parents are dealing with, because this conversation is about the work we're trying to do to their parents. But unfortunately, it's a trickle-down effect to that 18-year-old, 17-year-old, 16-year-old, 14-year-old, 13-year-old, 12-year-old, 10-year-old. I mean, I know 11-year-olds, I know 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds who are very politically aware, and they asking the right questions. But they're asking me those questions. And yes, I'm a little bit informed because I choose to be. And I admire my cousin, Chris Brown, because at the end of the day, he went to Douglas High School. He's from the streets, right? But it never limited him to say, I want to be informed. If you think about the movie Superfly, information is power, power is priceless. If we all embedded that mantra into our being, it wouldn't be that hard for all of us to grow and become better. So I think, just to add to your point, I think what has to happen is that we have to know the system is strategically changing. So when you think about the words of Daniel Blackman, the words of Antonio Brown, and the words of every brother on this call, I think one of the greatest things we can do is that we have to recognize that we do have to bounce back into the classroom a little bit more strategically, because these conversations grow up, you see? And since these conversations grow up, we have to remember that it grows into one of these youthful young brothers that we have. So when I think about Brother Robinson's comments, it's like, yeah, we really can't just engage about being a voter. We can't just engage about being civically engaged. It is reinstilling that power back into young men. And it got to start with young men of color, because it's unfortunate that the talented 10th is a thing. I feel it. I believe in it. I get it. But it's unfortunate that being a part of the talented 10th has to be a thing. And also that's embedded into the minds of Black men. And Black men, I'm 28. So I know a lot of 28-year-old brothers who literally were telling me, bro, I'm not voting, bro. I don't believe in it. I'm not doing it. Why? For what? What you doing that for? What you engaging for? They're not going to do nothing for you. But I tell them, like, hope, and I got it from Star Wars. This is my last point. I get it from Star Wars, The Last Jedi. Hope is like the sun. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So I tell people all the time, like, I keep in mind, I got hope about the fact that I'm just trying to be engaged enough. And I think that's the thing that it's hard to figure. And this is my question too, kind of like, everybody help me out. How do I go back into the classrooms? And this is also to push you guys. How do you guys go into the classroom and help these young men who have parents who will shut them down for speaking out about how they feel and speaking out with passion about what they believe in? Because we do know that we have young men whose fathers will tell them, you're not old enough to address me like that. So we're not having this conversation until you 18, till you 21. So I guess at the end of the day, the system's still going. So I guess to your point, Bishop Brown, I think with that system still going and still being strategic, it's kind of like the same initiatives the Black Panthers had, where they were like not asking for permission. I think it's the same thing. And I hear the tone in Daniel Blackman's voice, and we gonna get you there, brother, because the same way you and Brother Brown feel is the same way we all need to feel. We don't need no permission. We just need to know, all right, when I step outside of this line, I just need to have my ducks in a row. So that way, when you try to mess with those ducks, you didn't realize I was messing with a new row and I was building a whole new set of ducklings to come behind me. So that's my point.
So let me say this real quick to you,
Come
brother.
on with the Star Wars and the Superfly reference.
but I wanted to really address something real quick, man. I'm gonna keep this short because I want to be respectful of our time. Brother, you are just as important as Mondale, as Antonio, as me. Whether I'm elected or not, brother, that the one thing that we have done a poor job of, I'm 41 years old. And Greg Street, you know what I'm saying? Greg said it best, man. Like, the people in the community. You talked about the talented 10th, man. One of my mentors, God bless his soul, man, Reverend C.T. Vivian. Rev told me one time, he said, man, the talented 10th when I was growing up was established to send me out to get information, to come back to the community and to be a light in my own community. And I want you to know, as a teacher, the same way how Greg said that, you know, people like me, the A. Philip Randolphs of the world from back in the day, those individuals that were highly regarded and respected in our communities, whether they were preachers or politicians or educators, brother, you are the bridge, because the young people that, you know what I'm saying, some of these kids' parents working 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs. So they spend more time with you than their father. They spend more time with you than their brother. They spend more time with you than their single mom. So I want you to understand that our job and responsibility is to be a bridge of information from what we know to where you are. So even with Antonio, it's a whole generation of young brothers and sisters that have come up in the same conditions he came up in. And his job isn't to go back down there every 2 days and do it. His job is to make sure the information is available, accessible, and palatable. That's it. He got to make sure that he packages in a way where they can take that information and apply it to their own life. We can't expect to be the saviors of our community, but we can't become a part of the problem. And I want you to know, brother, if you don't remember anything else I say, whether it's Mondale, myself, Greg, Antonio, anybody on this call, you as a teacher, as you are a bridge to these young brothers' minds. You have the ability to show them a world that they may never see. And my grandfather was a diplomat to the United Nations. My family comes from Barbados. And my grandfather was a part of the United Nations when they built this thing called Sustainable Goals, which is we're well able to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own. In other words, we got to get out of their way, but we got to give them the tools they need to make their own decisions and to succeed. So I applaud you, brother, and I thank you not for your perfection, but for your flaws, for your honesty, and for your ability to just be a strong Black man, because we need more of that.
Thank you, my brother.
Can I just say something? You know, Daniel said something that I think is really important for us to kind of touch on. And then I just want to say one thing about the system that came up. But Daniel spoke about the fact that every generation has to move out the way to allow a new generation to rise to the occasion. The generations before my generation has failed to do that. And because they have failed to do that, we have young Black brothers that are not equipped with the education and information to better themselves, to pull themselves up, to see and be inspired by something greater than them. So I think that that's important. And that's a conversation that we really need to be honest about, because now you have, like my mom's generation and her mom's generation telling my generation, you have to save us. Well, you should have moved the hell out the way so we could be equipped with what we needed to be able to move this country forward. And I'm not living in the past of that. But I think it's important that we talk about it. So, because the only way to break a cycle is by talking about it. But if we continue to throw it under the rug and act as though it doesn't exist, then my generation will continue to make the same mistakes as our forefathers and their forefathers. And we will continue to operate in this dysfunctional space where we are the savior to this democracy, but we are the ones being left behind. So I wanted to just say that to Daniel's point, and I wanted to speak about the system really quick. When I was asked to run for city council, I said no twice. I had no interest in local politics. I did not understand the purpose of local politics. I truly didn't. And I said no, and my mom said to me, you should pray on it. And I prayed on it. The very next morning, I received a third phone call and they asked me to run again. And I knew it was God, because I've been led by God my entire life, and everything that I've ever done, God has led me on my path, and I've never questioned where God has led me. But when I moved into this political space, I did not question God's intent, but I sought understanding. I wanted to understand, why did you put me in this place where they see politics over people, where they don't care about the least of these, where they allocate resources and give them away to everybody but the people that need it? I didn't understand why you put me here. Then I realized, as I was writing legislation and passing laws in this city, I realized God was putting me here because I had to understand the construct. I had to understand at the most granular level the operations of this system that has been in place for centuries. This system that has never served our people. I needed to understand how it functioned at its most granular level, because in order for me to dismantle it, I needed to know it. And I needed to understand it better than anyone else around me. And then, only then, could I dismantle it and build it back up to be a true reflection of the people. And then I realized that is why God placed me here. This is why I am here at this time. And if anybody's been following my political career, I mean, I have completely shaken up how we see City Hall, how we operate within City Hall. You know, I've made sure that the least of these have been at the forefront of every conversation that we have, you know, and now I understand, as I grow in my position, I understand at the most granular level how our work directly impacts people at all levels. And I think that that's important.
Let me
Thank
just
you,
say
man.
something
Can I
real
get an
quick.
amen?
Yeah, Greg, I want to hear from you, Greg, brother, because I know you got some wisdom that we all need. But I just want to say a couple things. And this is the pushback that I need to offer brothers out of love. The first one is that the ideal of the talented 10th is a failed strategy, and we should all submit to that idea simply because there's no talented 10th amongst us. The idea that college educated folk will save the Black community is a failed strategy that even Du Bois himself divorced later in life, and understanding that this idea that there's an elite part or need to be an elite college educated person to be a leader in our community is a flawed strategy that was based. He took that language from white northern liberals who were flawed in themselves. This was a group, the American Baptist Home was a group, supported by John D. Rockefeller, and all of its flaws was laced in the fact that it's based on a capitalistic idea, and capitalism will not save Black people. So I think we should start there and being critical of the idea of the talented 10th, just as W. Du Bois was later in life when he realized the flaws in that thinking. I also wanted to say that to Brother Brown, in that I think, brother, you are maybe participating in an idea of history that's not real. Never have a generation got out of the way for the next generation. No one. King didn't move beside for John Lewis and those folk, Snick. Those folk didn't wait for King to move aside. King didn't want them to go march when they got bloodied in Selma, Alabama. They just did it. There's no point in history where an older generation stepped aside. Folk die in power. That's the nature of power. It is your generation. It's I'm 41 like Daniel. It is the generation that is coming of age that does not feel that the generation before them is doing enough. When they get to that point where they don't feel like it's enough, it's their time to do exactly what you're doing, run for office and push those folk out of the way. There's never a time where folk have succeeded power. It doesn't work that way. People die with it. So I think we should always know that. And it's also it's a misnomer to believe that any generation, not just the ones before us, but the ones before them, were enough for the generation that came after them. It is the job of progress and progressive ideas to always be furthering the people that you're fighting for. It would be wrong to believe that our parents would fight for the same thing that we were asking for. That is not the nature of progress. So we should always be pushing for more people to be included in the safety net of any democracy that we're fighting for. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Mondale. And I know, Greg, you're a very busy man over there, but I know I wanted to get your perspective because I know you are a man on the airwaves, 24/7. I know you're hearing a lot of different discussions and opinions from the people. What are they saying in regards to voting? What are you hearing out on the street?
I mean, with the corona situation, we're really not out in the streets the way we normally are. But the few people that I'm around, I just really try to educate people in our community to understand some of the moves that we have to make to get our freedom and equality, to understand the political system, to understand just how life works and just how to be free. You know what I'm saying? It's I think for us, like Antonio's saying, as a politician, doing his job to bring awareness to what's really going on in the political space. And that educates young people to start paying attention and to start spreading the word about it. Like we have to take this thing called the internet and flip the script. Like social media and the internet is going to keep Black people in slavery forever. Forever. Because if you pay attention to how things are posted, like if you follow me on social media, sometimes I'll post something ratchet and I'll post something educational next to it. And it's a test, just so you guys can see where our focus is and what we pay attention to as a people. Like we have to really put some effort into transforming the way our mind state is when it comes to politics, when it comes to business, when it comes to our community, when it comes to our people, period. Like we're always asking for freedom and equality, but most Black people don't know that white people kill more white people than Black people killing Black people. But because it's in the media the way it is, they got us tricked to assume that we're just a bunch of animals and we just run around killing people. But you may see a white boy on TV who walk up into a building and kill 25 people in one time. You know what I'm saying? So we have to really start to educate ourselves on, hey, little brother, you can make more money going to Atlanta Area Tech, Atlanta Metro, getting you an associate's degree in AC and heat than you can selling drugs. You can make more money learning how to work on cars versus trying to steal cars. Like a lot of you guys who are not in the real world don't understand what these kids are doing. They go steal a Benz or a BMW. They selling these cars for $1,500, so they can get a pair of Jordans, get a pair of jeans, and go to the club and kick it for the weekend. And it's like whenever you're trying to stick a lick, you trying to hit a jug, or you trying to come up on some fast money, we have to make these young kids understand, like when you get into that lifestyle, you're going to have to continue to live that lifestyle and you're never going to be able to stop. You got to educate yourselves. So we need the people that are really in tune with politics, they're really in tune to business, to start being school teachers and grabbing some of these young boys and making them understand, hey, listen, I know how you've been brought up. I know what you've been looking at all your life. You want that box Chevy, you want that dunk, you want that, but you got to understand, if you got to go out here and hurt somebody to get $20,000 to buy a car, you have to hurt somebody else to maintain that car. You have to hurt somebody else to do this. You have to hurt somebody else to do that. You have to take from somebody to do this. You have to understand that they need to know that fast money don't last long and long money don't come fast. It's very simple. But with the politics, it's great that we have people like Daniel and Antonio getting into it, because a lot of Black politicians over the years have been a part of the bullshit, just like the white politicians. If we're gonna keep it all the way real, you know, they get in office, and once they get in office, it's just all about them and their family and their homeboys and what they trying to do. Like, they don't understand that a lot of us understand what's really going on with politics. We know politics is really only about planning and development. We understand what the game is. So, but if you're gonna play the game, at least try to reach back and help your people, because it's crazy for us to be on TV every day talking about freedom and equality. We want freedom and equality from white people, but we can't. We got to sit. Think about this. We got to sit like Atlanta, Georgia. We made so much money on entertainment, so much money on politics, so much money in TV and business, and we have no Black billionaires in this city. And it's all because we don't work together. One person get them a little bag and they run home and they don't help nobody. So we have so many problems. The scope is so big that it's kind of, I know it's kind of hard for the politicians to kind of focus in on it, but we're gonna need some of the guys like Daniel and Antonio to make sure that they making these kids understand, like, the city of Atlanta gives back over $1 million every year because they can't get Black kids to go to trade school. I got friends that came out the streets and went to school and learned AC and heat and car repair. I got one friend, he got like 6 or 7 auto body shops around the city of Atlanta. He never was a street guy, but I know another guy who does AC and heat. He makes $15,000, $20,000 a week. So we have to make these kids understand, when you're not hustling and you're really out here trying to pursue a career, because the young people think hustling and grinding is something else. Hustling is not selling drugs. Hustling just means you got more than one stream of income. But from our days, you know, guys sold fish, guys sold whatever they could, you know, got an old refrigerator and fixed it and sold it, but they also had a job working at Walmart, or they had a job working at Kmart, or wherever they worked at full time. They had a job working for the city. We got to make these kids understand that the political system affects them in so many different ways if they don't participate in it. And it's going to keep them in the streets if they don't participate in it. They have to participate in what's going on. Like, we're in Atlanta, Georgia, and Atlanta is a whole lot more progressive than a lot of other cities are. So this is what they call the blueprint. But what I tell to some of my homies and some of my people that do business in Atlanta, they gave Atlanta to the Black people so they can make it feel like we got something. But Atlanta, the rich people in Atlanta are not Black. The people with the real money in Atlanta are not Black. Trust me. Now, we got a few rappers got a little money. We got a few actors got a little money. We got a few smart business people that has a little money. And we got a few smart business people that have a lot of money. But the problem is, these guys do not really come back to the community for real. They give away some backpacks for back to school, give away some turkeys for Thanksgiving, you know what I'm saying? You know, they give away some toys for Christmas, but they're not giving the real information to this community that really deserves to be free, and what we really are trying to accomplish from our generation. Like, and one thing I'm gonna say this before I get off, it's our fault that this is the way it is, because our generation, we abandoned these kids because we were chasing our dreams, and everybody's chasing that money and trying to be straight. But a lot of these kids fell to the wayside because of what people have been doing over the past 30 or 40 years.
And I just want to add one thing to that. I don't know if I know y'all heard about the 4th grade teacher that was killed in Atlanta, Georgia, on Fulton Industrial.
Yeah,
I went to Mays with him, and as an educator, it's hit me as you had this conversation, because it really just hit me to even think about the fact that, like, they robbed him for an X6 BMW. They killed him on the 17th. They found the X6 BMW on the 18th, right? Because you can't take that to a chop shop. It got chips. It got all that. So just to build into, like, add on to his point of, like, what Brother Street is saying, like, it's really important that I really feel what, like, Mundell is saying. It's like, it's the restructuring of the mind. It's creating, like, my nonprofit is a school of thought, right? But I think, like, the idea of the Black man needs to be a school of thought. It don't have to be a program. It don't have to be funded. I mean, I've had my nonprofit for 3 years and don't have no money in the budget, but I've been doing the work. I don't care. It's the same thing. I feel like we really have to like reinstall an ideology in our people again. And I think that's where it really starts, because I don't like it. This is a deep and harder conversation to have. And I'm just grateful to be here, 28 years old, and recognizing like, wow, if it wasn't for the fact that I tried a little bit, I wouldn't even be here today, you know? So it's just really interesting that the effects are so much heavier than when we think about why we don't participate politically. They are really heavy. Like these are some dangerous effects that come from not being civically engaged. And I guess that's something like to Mondale's point from earlier. I think that's something important that we have to add in as well, that there is danger to not being politically savvy. And I think we can't overlook that no more either. And I just want to say, man, I'm grateful to y'all for even having the voices that y'all have. And I'm a little bit more confident that, like, you know, at least whoever's watching, and when, you know, they get to rewatch this, they get to see truth in the fact that the voices, because I didn't have these many Black male voices come at me in this way in 2011. Like I had it, but I wasn't able to recognize what it means to have a village or have a tribe in your lifetime. And now that in my generation, we were kind of like lost upon that idea. Now you can look at these young folk. They do not, like when I say young folk, I mean people younger than me. They don't know what it means to have a tribe. They don't know what it means to have a village. So it's crazy that when Brother Street says we don't know how to make create that book, like Maynard Jackson says, the ballot, the book, and the book. Like it's just so interesting that that's what's lost in this experience. But thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much, man. Everybody has brought up so many great points. I'm learning so much, given the work that I've been doing in this short amount of time. You know, I'm so appreciative, just like you said, just to be amongst you all and just to listen and just absorb all this like a sponge. I want to talk about next steps. You know, and we're talking about our passion to get our brothers and sisters to the polls in this up and coming runoff, but we need to know the dates. What are the exact dates and what are we to look forward to? I'll give this question to Daniel as we get coming close to election.
I mean, first of all, you know, I want to echo the sentiments. This call, this platform, the brothers on here, man. I mean, it couldn't have been a better group. We don't all agree on everything we think, or we're not all cut from the same cloth, but we're all Black men. And that means a lot to me to get better. So the last day to register to vote on the January 5th election is December 7th. So you have until December 7th. If you have a cousin, you got a brother, sister, a friend in the community.
That is 7 days, y'all. 7 days.
7 days. And here's the thing too. If you're going to be 18 on election day, you might not be 18 right now, but if you're going to be 18 by January 5th, you can register to vote by the 7th. Early voting begins on December 14th, but we need all hands on deck, man. There are 3 myths I want to tell y'all. One, Black folks and Democrats don't come back out in runoffs. We need to make sure that we encourage our brothers and sisters to know that there is an election. And number 2, we got to address this huge issue that, you know, our vote don't matter. I know we've heard a lot on this call, but, you know, people like Mondale and myself and Antonio, we got to let people understand the importance of it's easy for us to say Biden and Harris need a Senate majority. The average person don't know what a Senate majority is, but the Senate majority determines lifetime judicial appointments, right? And the criminal justice system has been stacked up against us. At this point in his career, Donald Trump has appointed more judges than George Bush and Barack Obama combined. So I need us to understand the importance, to Mondale's point. It's not about the person, the individual, the candidate, as much as it is the position and the influence and the direct impact that it's going to have on our lives. I'm running for the Public Service Commission in Georgia. Most people don't know it's 5 people in Georgia that determine how much you pay on your light bill and on your gas bill and how much internet access we're going to have. You want to talk about being left behind? 88% of Georgia's prison population reaches the 3rd grade level. So what happens when COVID-19 adversely impacts our communities and our kids get left behind from an educational standpoint because they can't get on the internet? What we then will see is the same thing that happened in the 80s with the crack cocaine epidemic. We'll lose an entire generation if we don't allow there to be policies in place that give us the same playing field. When I graduated high school in 97, we was talking about the digital divide all the way back in the 90s. And now we're still having that same conversation because of coding, AI, autonomous driving, and all these new jobs are going to take away the jobs of the future, man, because the things you could do 20, 30 years ago with a high school diploma, you can't do today because those jobs are automated. So we got to stress it. What I'll say about this election is we need everybody to go to the polls on January the 5th. There is a runoff. There is no election after that runoff. After January the 5th, we will know who our 2 U.S. senators are and who your next Public Service Commission is. And, you know, I just can't emphasize enough, the voting deadline is December 7th. Early voting begins December 14th. The vote is on January 5th. I don't care how tired you are, what kind of voter fatigue is out there. We got to encourage our people to go to the polls, to be active, and to really do our part to make sure our community knows that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we got to make sure that we are in a position to dictate the policies, the future, and the resources of our own community. So I hope that helps.
I think it's important to note that, you know, we would be remiss. We are in Georgia. We are Black men who are affected negatively by the criminal justice system, regardless of you know who we are and what our statutes are and what our criminal justice background is, or our criminal record background is, if we have one or not. Black man is almost a felony conviction in itself. Today was a runoff in Georgia that no one is talking about. Right, as a progressive woman of color running in Athens, the polls are closed or just closed, and
Deborah Gonzalez,
absolutely, who's running on a progressive platform to say that she's going to end cash bail for low-level crimes and also people with low propensity to like not show up to court, which is important. She's also talking about not prosecuting marijuana in some instances. So I think, and running against a Republican who's talking about tough on crime, that idea that this is what happens when we center, you know, like the Senate races. They are important, but Deborah winning that seat frees people from jail immediately. Deborah winning that seat send brothers and sisters home immediately. And nobody's like, and the media, the $187 million already spent on media airwaves for this runoff, nobody talked about that race. That is a flaw in the way we play politics in this country. So we need to acknowledge that. So hopefully the outcome is good, and Athens will have a progressive woman of color as a district attorney to match the progressive sheriff that was elected in the general election in John Williams, so as to stop over criminalizing Black bodies in that part of Georgia. Also, I think you said something about December 7th being a voter registration date. I just want to reiterate that December 14th, people can start voting in person. So we need to make sure we know that, and also get those ballots back as soon as possible. And if you've not requested, please request it. Fill out your application and mail it back.
Thank you so much, Mondale. Does anybody has any last words as we conclude this conversation? No. All right. Awesome. Well, yo, I thank you guys so much for participating in this discussion. There are more and more discussions and dialogue to be had. I'm Etienne Maurice. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Again, please follow the Black Male Voter Project on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on all social media platforms, so that you can stay informed and stay engaged with everything, with all the town halls and roundtables that we'll be having up until the runoff elections. Again, gentlemen, thank you. And thanks again, Chris. Chris, you the man.
Yeah, I just wanted to close, guys. You know, when we were talking about putting this conversation together, one of the things that I wanted is, I wanted this thing to be straight with no chaser. You know what I mean? I wanted it to be authentic. I wanted it to be truth. I wanted passion to be behind it. And I think we got exactly that. I think the opportunity to be able to bring men together, Black men together, like I said in the beginning, is power. There's power in the unity of bringing Black men together. And we have a great group of men that are, have very different, unique backgrounds. I'm very appreciative of you guys' time. I'm grateful that you took the time to, to share your thoughts, to not hold back, to be authentic, to be genuine with this conversation. And I think that's important. And I believe that as we move forward and continue to build and grow, I think we just need more platforms, more opportunities to come together, more opportunities to unite and speak and voice our opinions and dialogue. And like you said, I think Bishop had spoken earlier, we're not going to all agree. We're going to have all different perspectives about things. But, if we are able to come together and unite, there's power in that. So with that being said, I am so grateful for your time. Again, that's January 5th with the Georgia runoff. Early voting starts December 14th. Can't say that enough times, but Etienne, I am so grateful for you. Etienne is a young man who has, doing big things with Walk Good. I'm so grateful for you to take the time to moderate this discussion. All of you gentlemen, coming from your backgrounds, I appreciate your time. I am so grateful, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon.